Andrew Marc Rowe is a local artist and former lawyer who writes spiritual dirtbag comedies. I love it. And children's books under the name Captain David Holloway. 40 years old, he spent the last nearly 13 years working to rid himself of intergenerational trauma, and now is speaking out about the issues and problems plaguing this planet that he did the hard work to release. You can find your work at Captain Holloway's Booty on Instagram. Love the name.
And there's also going to be a Facebook page that I'm sorting out today because, anyways, just getting all this stuff sorted out as it comes.
That's right. You can buy some of your relaunch books, such as The Cutlass Swoon, A New World Romance, and many of the videos of him sharing his experiences in an effort to spread the message of healing and love far and wide.
Yeah, and I would say that I'm also, I'm relaunching the Parasol Files, which I previously released 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿 and Factorino, the Come Up, which I call it a psychedelic, well, call it at the time a psychedelic soaked zombie horror comedy. But it's kind of like a love letter to the 60s, and it's set in the 80s in London and California, but it's kind of like a love letter to 60s counterculture, all this stuff, like LSD is actually protective against the zombie virus, so then eventually the whole fucking world is tripping to try to prevent getting infected. Anyways, but anyways, that's being relaunched today. I'm gonna hopefully get it done the next day or two, and then putting some money into advertising it, and we'll see where it goes from there.
So how did you get into writing?
I always when I was a kid, one of my earliest memories was of my parents had a place on Grenfell Avenue, and there was I remember watching, do you remember Rankin and Bass Hobbit, the one that they made fun of on South Park with Lemmy Winks, the gerbil up his ass, that one? so that was one of my earliest memories of when I was a kid, and I was pretty prolific as a reader as a kid. I was reading way above my level, which my mother would tell me all the time that I was. I don't know why she wanted to boost my ego like that, but in any event, I was reading The Hobbit, and I just felt like I just wanted to write. I remember my very first attempt at writing, why do I have a clear memory of this? This kind of thing, right? But it was just 2 pages on a lined piece of Hilroy when I was 5 or 6. And then that, then I just said, screw it, and never went back to it. And then when I was in grade 6, I wrote basically we were given this project to make a book that was kind of a craft or whatever. And so I did do you know the game King's Quest?
I do.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, when I was five, I played a bunch of King's Quest, and if you play King's Quest 3, there's a point where you get on a pirate ship, and you have to cross the sea to get to this beach or whatever. And I was I basically wrote that whole thing. And if I look at it now, considering that I'm here now, having quit my job and relaunched this book, that was, I can see the connection there. The same thing with in grade 7, we were given a similar project, and in grade 6, I did the whole thing where fake leather binding, the pages with the coffee grounds to make it look weathered and all that shit. And then in grade 7, I was at McDonald Drive, and then I switched over to 𝐾𝐨 St. Patrick, and because I was a bit lazy at the time, and I saw that that this was gonna, I can't remember what it was, but I was just I had this freak out. Then Mom was all right, whatever, go over to this other French immersion stream, which was what I was in. And anyways, I met some friends there, and I remember going over to this guy Brad's house, and we played it was Resident Evil 2 all night. And so when we got the job, in the English class at 𝐾𝐨 St. Patrick, we were given this creative writing thing, and I ripped off Resident Evil to a T. And one of the first reviews. So when 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿 and Factorino has already been released. It was released originally in February of 24, I think. But anyways, one of the reviews I got was Robert Anton Wilson's Resident Evil. And like, if you like, you know, that my experience of the way life works is that there's like you know, you ever watch True Detective?
Yeah.
You remember how Rust Cole was like, time is a flat circle like this? And then like his part, like, what's his name? Was kept telling him stop saying weird shit. But I've certainly had that experience in life where it almost feels like kind of like you're coming back around to like a similar experience, you know, over time or whatever. And I find it very funny that, you know, the two earliest experiences I tried to write, one was like on a pirate ship and one was like basically like a zombie, you know, thing like Resident Evil. Like, these are the ones that are kind of like out here now that I'm launching, now that I've finally made the leap. Because I mean, I'm done being a lawyer. I spent like 13 years doing it. I got no, you know, it's either this thing works or I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
So how, like, you were into writing since you were a kid. Why did you choose law?
Well, the thing is like I never really did any work. You know, I never really worked at it. You know, the thing about writing or pursuing any kind of art is that you have to work at it. You know, one of the things when one of the things I talked about, you know, I think on some of the videos that I was talking about, but, you know, like I just basically was, you know, we float around like, you know, when we're kids and like call things normal that are not exactly, you know, we'll say they aren't conducive to our own happiness. And, you know, for me, like I was a lazy kid. You know, I didn't have any like stick-to-itiveness, any gumption or whatever. And, you know, my work, so basically what happened, my parents said to me and the rest of my family, after high school, either you go to university or you're out of the house, which is coercion. It's coercion to essentially service their fears about us, which were, you know, those were fears that I had too at the time. So I was like, okay, well, whatever. And, you know, I just basically floated through. Like, I remember for my first year of university, I was going to be a med student, or I was going to do pre-med or whatever. And I got into like an advanced chemistry course, an advanced calculus course, or yeah, the Math 1000 or whatever. And I barely passed it because I didn't do a fucking thing. I was so lazy that I didn't do a thing. And anyways, like I know that if I had been working at it, I could have, but you know, in the second term, I decided to take a German course, and I basically could do well without really trying. So that was my thing there. I mean, like the whole of that period of my life, I was just trying to do the easiest thing, taking the easiest way. I remember Mom would say something to me like, the path of least resistance is what you do all the time, which was true, absolutely true at the time. And then I ended up graduating, and I had met some friends I met somebody while I was doing my undergrad, which included a performance arts and communications media diploma, which I found fun, even though I never really put it into practice. Although now I'm doing Captain David Holloway on the Instagram account there, so there's a bit of the acting going on now. But anyways, so I, so when I finished that, this friend I'd met told me about how in South Korea you could just go and teach English if you have an undergrad or a bachelor's degree. It doesn't matter. And so what it's in, or if you have any idea how to teach or not. I ended up there on a 1-year contract. I managed to make it 3 months before I got out of there. It was like total debauchery on the weekends with the other expats. Like got blackout drunk all the time. Like, if you think Newfoundlanders can drink, holy shit, go check out South Korea. But anyways, then, you know, and I just was not good at, like, I just wasn't into doing it. So I came back, and when I was in undergrad, like, I was working at Brewery Lane, which was a local homebrew shop. And I started living in my parents' basement again. I started brewing beer and all this kind of stuff. And I was like at this crossroads in the February of 2009. And like I'd been like, when I was brewing beer, like I was doing it all from scratch. Like it was like, and this was before all the like the microbreweries popped up. Like my uncle Rudy, he was kind of like egging me on like to do it, and then he's like every time I see him now, he's like, "Oh, we should have done like this like brew pub or whatever." But I was basically thinking to myself, I'm either going to Chicago or Berlin. Chicago for I can't remember the name, or VLB Berlin, which is like a brewing school, or I'm going to go to law school. My brother was in law school. My father went to law school. Everyone went to UMB, and I just ended up saying, okay, like, you know, and my parents were like worried about me, and so they were like, you know, like I know when I made the decision to write the LSAT, like mom was super happy with it and all this shit. So anyways, I did it, got a like good score, ended up going to law school, and anyways, like when I was at law school, I was just like, again, I was just like pushing off. I was taking the path to least resistance, trying to forget the fact that eventually I was going to have to do this job that I found, like, I didn't think law was interesting. Like, it was just something to do, something to earn a living, right? Make a living. And, you know, the first year I did not great. Second year I basically got prescribed Concerta by the fucking like two page, like went to the campus doctor. Somebody told me like, maybe you have ADHD, because I fucking got these marks that normally I was doing much better, but it's because I had to actually work. And anyways, I went to the campus doctor. Like, it was a 2-page form, and they gave me this fucking powerful like methylphenidate or whatever. It's well, but I mean, this is the thing, right? And then, but I basically did like fine, like in terms of like I got much better grades. I ended up getting a job at Cox and Palmer, which is one of the big regional firms, which I'm sure that nepotism played a role in that due to my father's reputation in the legal community. But I know I got better grades and all that stuff. But eventually, it came to a head when in February 2013, I got called to the bar. And, this was after I'd come back, and I was involved with a woman that I loved at the time, and, still love her, but, she's ex-wife now. But anyways, I was involved with people. It was like on paper, I had everything. I had like a job at the big firm. I had the relationship, the whole thing, but I was fucking miserable. And I took this overdose of iboga on the weekend of my call to the bar. So iboga is like a African hallucinogenic root in Gabon, Africa. It's considered like a national treasure. It's like, used as part of a coming of age ceremony. And it was, at the time, it was legal. You could get it online, no problem. And
Iboga,
yeah, IBOGA.
Okay.
It was this psychedelic that was discovered to have basically able to interrupt the addiction of somebody with serious heroin addiction with no withdrawal. There was this guy named Howard Lotzoff in the late 1960s who basically was into all these drugs and including heroin. And he took this thing, just as a lark or whatever, because it was anyways, he took it, and then he had this full day trip, because it's a 24-hour thing. And
wow.
And anyways, he woke up and he was basically, he didn't have any withdrawals. And so anyways, it's used at these clinics everywhere in the world. But before they do it, because it has it has an impact on the QT interval in your heart, which is how long it takes between beats, and it can elongate it so that basically if it goes too long and your heart doesn't beat, then you can die. And people in Gabon, it's 1 out of every 100 people, something like that, doesn't survive one of these ceremonies.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, so at these places that they give it, they do EKGs, they have heart rate monitors, the whole fucking thing. And it was as close to suicidal, actually suicidal, that I ever came, because I was basically totally not giving a shit about my own, my own self. I just wanted some relief because I was depressed. I was during this period, I got on SSRIs as well as the Concerta, which became Adderall and Vyvanse and all that shit. I tried every fucking drug. It all zombified me and just, you know, those things, those SSRIs and whatever, that like those are band-aids. Like that's my experience with it. There was a period where it would like it kept me going, and so like it does have a place. But I look at, you know, this way that it's used as just like an ongoing thing for the rest of your life is basically being like, you know, Western medicine has hit a fucking wall in terms of its understanding of psychology. But if you go down to like Peru, where I eventually ended up for like ayahuasca, or if you go to like, I'm sure, to Gabon, and you talk to these people who have been using psychedelics in like a, you know, they know what they're doing with them.
Yeah.
And like, the, you know, the first thing they said to me when I did eventually end up in Peru was like, forget all this shit that you've learned back at home. Like, this isn't a drug, this is a medicine. And it's like, you know, you don't really know what the fuck is going on for most of the whole thing. But Jesus, I went 5 times to Peru. And the last time I was there, because it was like the other thing the shaman said is like, this isn't a one and done thing, this is a process. It was like a graduation ceremony. And sure enough, you know, through the jigs and the reels, this was February of this year, through the jigs and the reels of me just basically following my heart wherever it led. Like I'm now in this position now where, you know, I'm basically, you know, quit my job. Like, I don't have a specific idea of how it's all going to turn out. Mm-hmm. But if you look at, like, you know, the thing about the way, like, when I first, so that, anyways, after this iboga experience, which turned into a total fucking nightmare, because I basically thought I had a heart attack. I called it, like, over the night, I was like, I was being trip sat by my sister who had no fucking idea what I was doing, like, really. And anyways, I ended up in the hospital, and like the whole family was watching me there in turns. I was babbling all kinds of crazy shit. I actually ended up in my stocking feet, like bursting out, pulling off these the fucking leads to the heart monitor, and like deking around like the orderlies or whoever the fuck was in there, like to run out in the middle of February, my stocking feet and a Johnny coat to fucking like run down like anyways, it was just, you know, I eventually came to my senses just in time to like see that there was some guy clearing the parking lot at the building where Stuart McKelvey is. Anyways, like I got in, he drove me back. But this was like traumatic to my family, right? Totally traumatic. Like everyone was like, what the fuck? Like, you know, and so, you know, to some extent, like my family's been terrified of that happening again. And, you know, but, you know, when I came back from that, like that's when I really started writing. And then I eventually, you know, the weird thing about these medicines, right? Like is, you know, you know, we have this idea, we're born into this idea of reality being totally separate. But if you look at any kind of like Eastern mysticism, like they'll say it's all one, you know, like you must have heard that like phrase before, like, you know, yeah, it's all one and all this kind of stuff. But, you know, that's just like, actually what that means, like at bottom of all of this, is that there's no separation between any of us. You know, there's no, whatever idea of our own identity as like a separated being from the world at large. Like that is part of the wound. Like the wound of most everyone has is like this notion of separation, right? The you know, Hindus called it Maya. Like there's Maya is what we're born into, and it's illusion. You know, mythology from around the world. One of the guys who I really like, you know, helped me on my journey was Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is like a framework where he took all these myths. You know, you must have heard of The Hero's Journey. Like,
I did, yeah.
So he took all these myths from around the world and stories and basically tried to tease out a framework. And, you know, it's taught at like screenwriting school, like things. I've seen books and all this kind of stuff. But what Campbell really was trying to get at was like, what is it about stories that tell us something about being human? And he was taking religious stories. He was taking like stories that are like quote unquote fiction, like, you know, things that, and basically he got this framework. And, you know, the thing he said, which as far as I have experienced it is exactly right. He said, all religions are true, but none are literal, which is, you know, a great deal of suffering around religion comes with the fact that people think that these things are historical texts, as in They are telling you exactly what happened from a historical point of view, rather than being like, okay, if it's truly all one, and that means everything that comes into my consciousness has some purpose to be there, which is like kind of like one of the things that you would have to accept if you actually thought it was all one. Well, then, all of these stories that we encounter have some purpose for our own, for our own lives, we'll say. And so, like any of the religious stories, any of the things that we encounter are there for our benefit. As in, like, if it comes into your consciousness, it's there for a reason. Which is, like, this is something that I learned after, like, through years of going down to, like, Peru. And, like, one of the first things that because basically I hit a wall after, even though I was writing, I hit a wall. And, like, the fucking crazy thing about that iboga experience is that, because it was like almost like, when I've had these experiences, it's almost like you're entering into a dialogue with something, right? Like, and this was something that was more pronounced with iboga and ayahuasca than anything else. And it was like, in the first one, it was like I was having a dialogue with this fucking, in the fucking trip, it was just after 𝐦𝐿 had been released. And it was like this floating head of Samuel L. Jackson as Stephen the house slave, who was like speaking like an American accent, but it was like he had like a thick African accent, and it was just like, it was like, oh yeah, it was wild. But anyways, like I was like at the end of this thing, like, I had this like, vision of like, it was the jungles of South America, and it was like, you got to go and find a witch doctor there. Which is like witch doctor, I suppose, is African terminology for shaman. Which, I mean, shaman is not even a Peruvian word. It's about like, so it's Siberia. It's from Siberia or these. Anyways, like they call themselves either ayahuasqueros or curanderos, like healers, which is absolutely correct. But anyways, this was the thing, like I got this message, like, you got to go back down there, or you got to go there and find a witch doctor, because I cannot fix you.
Before you move on with that,
yeah,
iboga, is that related to ibogaine?
Yeah. So ibogaine is like the main chemical constituent of the plant.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you go from iboga to your first, and when was your first ayahuasca experience?
Yeah, this is kind of what I'm getting at. So it was December 2014. Was my first ayahuasca experience, and I was called to the bar in February of 2013. So it was December, and I tell you that the thing about it, like, I was on and off with my ex at the time. We could get together, get into a breakup, all this kind of stuff, because I was a mess, but I was like, I basically knew we were together, living in her dad's house, and anyways, I don't want to get into too much of that stuff. But anyways, we're split at the time, and so I was out gallivanting, and going on the bar, looking to drag off, that kind of shit, as you're in your 20s or whatever. And plus, you're super depressed. Anyways, there was this girl I met at this bar, and she gave me her number. We end up outside of the bar, and just like walking, and this fella is there that she takes an interest in, and more than me. And then I just like get this like crazy jealous rage. I like go home, like she's like obviously gone with this guy, like total fucking stranger, and I write all this fucking nasty shit to her, and then I wake up in this like hangover haze, and I'm like, what the fuck? And at the time, I was listening to Joe Rogan, like when I was going to the gym. And there were 2 podcasts with Amber Lyon, like that came out within a year of each other. So Amber Lyon was a CNN correspondent who ended up in Bahrain to like basically document these like human rights abuses that were going on with the government over there. And so she interviewed all these people who were basically getting killed and all kinds of horrific stuff. And then like smuggles a memory card with all this stuff out in her bra. She ends up back in the US, and they like make this, make this documentary out of all the footage. And like the first CNN is all like, yeah, this is going to be great. And then apparently she says in the first podcast interview that she saw this government fellow walk into her boss's office, then walk out. And then her boss comes out and says, we're only going to run the documentary once on Saturday night at midnight. And so she was just like, well, fuck this shit. Like, we're going to start our own thing. And so like when she was talking about it, she was starting this like, because this was 2013 or something, I can't remember. Anyways, it was early enough in the internet days that, this kind of thing could happen. And so she was talking about that. But then Joe, at the end of the interview, even though he's never taken ayahuasca himself, like started talking about mushrooms and ayahuasca and psychedelics. And she was like, I never done anything more than a joint. But anyways, that was it. That was like the end of the podcast. A year later, she's back on. And she basically says that she has a meltdown while she's trying to start this like news network that's going to tell all the stories that no one wants to tell or whatever. And like she decides to pick up the phone or go on the computer, like book a flight to Peru, flies down, and then has this like immediate like relief on the first night, and basically is like, this is the problem, anxiety, and she had gotten PTSD from the fact that she was talking to these people about these horrors that they were experiencing. And this was around the time I was going to the gym, listening to this stuff, and I was just like, fuck, like, this is it. I'm doing it. And like, I remember, like, because I had, like, the whole thing with Iboga had fucking terrorized the family. And like, I was fucking terrified too, because I literally had a psychotic break. Now, from a psychotic, like, it was a psychotic break, but if you read any of Mircea Elialde's description of what a shamanic initiation, what the elements are, they were like the descent into the underworld, all this kind of shit, like literally fucking every single one of them. And, this is one of the things about modern society and its godlessness, I would say. God being a word that is so loaded. Like when people ask each other, like, do you believe in God or whatever like that? And like, as soon as you say that to somebody, like, you are basically, whatever prejudice or ideas that they might have, like, comes out of that question. Because what my favorite definition of God is what Joseph Campbell said. He said, it's that which is beyond words. And so anytime we try to talk about these things, like, you are basically, like, this is basically, like, it's so loaded. Like, for me, God and nature, same thing. Like, like, but again, those are still words. Like, it's one of these things. When I was a kid, like, I was a total atheist. I had a copy of The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, and it was just like I was an insufferable fucking nerd with that thing.
Yeah. It's funny, a lot of atheists become like biblical zealots of atheism.
Yeah, well, this is the thing is like it's so I find it hilarious. Like, and this is just an example of the cosmic joke of reality, which, my ultimate experience of reality is that this is just entertainment for the eternal in eternity. That, we all, like, it wouldn't be as fun if we didn't take it so fucking seriously. But in any event, so that was like the thing. And then I smoked DMT when I was right before law school, and then I went up an atheist and came down. I was like, and that doesn't work anymore.
So what was the first experience like?
With ayahuasca?
Yeah.
So anyways, I ended up down there, and it was like all this stuff. Like, I remember my dad like trying to stop me, like my parents were like, you can't be serious after this fucking debacle with the what's name. And I remember Dad saying, I don't know, I was 29, I don't know what I can do besides physically restrain you. And anyways, I pushed through my own fears to get out there. But this is the thing about I just want to talk about fear for a moment. What is required of us for, to kind of like go on this path of, we'll say, like, self-realization or individuation, I think is what Carl Jung put it, or, there's so many of these words about what we are ultimately seeking that, like again, it's one of these things. We're talking about something. Unless somebody has had the experience, it's totally fucking meaningless. Like to me, like if you were just listening to some preacher rap on about what God is and what the world is and all this shit, and you haven't had any kind of personal experience of any of that stuff, it's like, well, why the fuck do you believe it? I was an atheist for the longest time because I was certain based on my own experiences that this was the case, and then suddenly I had an experience that changed it, and so suddenly I changed my mind. But until that happens, like, I just, don't believe or disbelieve anything that I'm saying. Just like, figure it out for yourself. Like, this is, it's like people shouldn't believe any of the stuff that anybody says just because somebody says it. Like, obviously, on your own journey, like, you can see that you could, once you start to get like, on this journey, you can kind of like get some, you see other people talking about same stuff that you've been going through. So you can start to recognize the wisdom and truth in some of the words that you see, right? But in any event, so the first one, we get on this, like, I did it the way I did it was like, I was at this, with this company called Pulse Tours, which was run by a gentleman named Dan Cleland, who now runs Soltara, which is basically Club Med for ayahuasca in Costa Rica. I was there once. It was good. It was like high end. But like at this point, like this was called Pulse Tours. It was near a little village called Libertad in just up the Ucayali River from Iquitos, which is like the big jungle city in Peru. And the first thing we did was like a week doing Machu Picchu. We drank San Pedro, which was like the mescaline cactus of South America versus peyote in like North America. But, that was kind of like, that was great. We became friends with the people that were on this thing, but then we ended up down there. And like to get there, like we flew into Iquitos, then we stayed at a hotel, and then we got on a bus, and the bus took us to a boat launch. And we got on the boat for a while, and then we got there up at the center. Well, the first time I did it, because I went to this twice within 9 months, but the first time I did it, there was no guy with an AK-47. The second time, there was a guy with an AK-47.
Lovely.
Oh yeah, just to deter pirates.
Yeah.
So, anyways, but it was an adventure, man. It was fucking so cool. But I ended up, at this center, and but the way it works is, there's, first we had like, group share, everyone talking about their intentions, and I was like unhappy with work. I was unhappy with, myself and all this shit. And like, it was just depressed. And so, everyone, like there were people sharing like stories about like witnessing their being in the same room when their mother was getting sexually assaulted when they were a child. Like it was like heavy stuff. And I remember thinking, like, oh, Jesus, I just don't like my job. So, anyways, and then we go to, we get these like conversations with the shamans and all this stuff where he says like, it's like not a one and done, like it's not a drug, it's a medicine. And then we go to like the first night of the ceremony, like the way it works is like they serve you this like cup of absolutely vile tasting, like it's like molasses, burnt molasses, like it's brutal. But anyways, you drink it and you go back.
A sludge.
A sludge, yeah.
Okay.
It's rotten, but. There's like one candle lit in the room because it's like it's on the equator, so it's like sun's up at 6, goes down at 6 type of thing, or like very close to the equator. So eventually, like we do it right after the sun goes down. So the candle's lit in the middle of this big maloka is what it's called, which is a big circular hut, and like everybody's got a mat against the wall, and there's a puke bucket and a because like it makes you sick from both ends, like it can. Like never trust a fart was some of the fucking early nuggets of wisdom I got when I was down there. Anyways, like you got the blanket, like you lie down like for most of the thing. But and then there's the shamans who they sing icaros, which are like songs. That they say were given to them by the plants when they do these like dietas, which is like they'll just go in like meditation and isolation and drink like whatever the plant could be. It could be tobacco, it could be something else, it could be this. And then like develop a relationship with it, and that's where they learn these songs. I've had like weird experiences of like the music, like, or the songs that they're singing modulate the experience in a very like, it's like just like even like the way the trip is happening. Like it's like unless you've had the experience, like there's no way of making it make any kind of sense. But anyway, so these happen during the but they wait for like a half hour or so for it to kick in. And I remember that first night I was there, drank it, and part of the ceremony is they have mapacho, which is like ceremonial tobacco. Like everyone's smoking those things like throughout the time that they're down at the retreat. But it's like, it's basically, it's not like a pack export smooths or whatever like that. This is like, serious like tobacco, and it's used in like a meditative way. And it's like one of these things where they're just like, we took everything from all the native peoples as European, like descendants of Europeans. Like we took all these things, including tobacco, and like without any kind of like idea, any respect for what any of this stuff actually was. But and anyways, like so at that point, half hour in, when it first kicks in, I remember very vividly that first experience, because literally the moment the 𝐸𝐻𝐿 started, I started feeling like it was like I was being swayed in a hammock, is what it felt like. I was being swayed in that. The lightning blasted. There was a massive thunder crack, and then he started singing.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it was
Intense.
Well, it was just like, and then it was just like, the first couple lessons I got during that first trip first was about judgment. And judgment is something that we do with one another, no problem or whatever. But it was like I was given this vision of a snake. Like I grew up in like there's 4 of us kids, and we used to fucking like grill each other to the max. Like we're super, like that was like a snake pit. But the idea of judgment was like a snake that envenoms itself with every bite. And so like, I got basically every time I went down there, it was like I was given this curriculum of how to like get happier, that like, it was the way I did. And, I got this like, I also got this idea about like when you go to work, because the funny thing about like all this stuff is like when you're on your path, it seems to me like you just like things start working out better for you. When I was working at Cox and Palmer, which was my first job, like the amount, like you have to be a workaholic in order to work at one of those big firms, just based on the number of hours that are required. Like, it's just impossible not to. And there's no, and this is like a culture that's fostered. And I hated that. I was like, beginning of every year was like, you got 1,500 billable hours, which, doesn't sound like a ton, but when you're talking about what can actually be billed to a client and like how much percentage of your work during the day, like unless you're a total fucking like social, like I don't want to talk to anybody and go in your, and you don't want to do any of this other extra schmoozing work or whatever. But so I did not like that at all. But literally the day or two after I booked the trip, I get a call from a guy who works at an insurance company. My dad did a bunch of work with him. Get a call from him, and he's like, "Hey, we're interviewing for this position in in-house counsel at Intact Insurance." Like literally the moment I made that decision, that's when I got this call. And so I was scheduled to go down to Peru in December 2014, 1st of December. I was scheduled to start this job that was like 9 to 5. Not a huge amount of files, not a huge amount of stress, like the stress level. And it was like the January 1st, 2015 was when I was scheduled to start. And so, basically I was like, shit, like it's like everything's fucking coming up, Andrew. Like, it was very much like a good, but this is the thing, right? Like, I think there's a lot of terror around doing the things that we want to do, like we dream of doing, but we think that, it's unrealistic. I've been following my heart, which has been telling me to make the risky we'll say risky choices of like, you know, jumping into things that, you know, do you know Terence McKenna?
I do. I read his book a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Me and my buddies, not to go on a tangent.
It's just True Hallucinations.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's
so fucking insane.
Yeah. Me and my buddies used to do an annual camping trip in September, and we'd take mushrooms. And then the build up to it, I read Terence McKenna's book before I went for one of the trips.
Yeah. One of the things he said is, and I can't remember the exact words of the quote, is that, but it's basically, nature loves courage. If you do, you know, follow your heart and do the courageous thing and throw yourself into the abyss, you will find that there's a feather bed at the bottom. And he said, this is what the people who touched the true alchemical gold understood. And it's like, if you look at mythology, which is basically all these stories that people love to blow, like there's something talking to us about them. And it's always, you know, it starts off, you know, in the mundane world, like the world that's like, you know, like fucking Luke on Tatooine or whatever, and he's like working as a fucking moisture farmer with, you know, whatever. And then suddenly Ben Kenobi comes down, or I can't remember the exactly what, but he, you know, basically like with the lightsaber saying that, you know, this is your destiny to become, you know, to go and do all this shit, and like basically he's got to make that leap into the unknown. And these things are, you know, we never had psychology for the majority of human existence. You know, like what we had were stories that were there in order to help point us in the correct, like basically to help us to wake up to our true nature. Our true nature is love. Like when people say that, like, you know, what that actually means is, you know, it's hard, like it's again, like how do you fucking, like if I say to you, the entire world is made of love, we are all made of love, anything that appears to not be loving is actually an illusion that is there to help us wake up to this fact that we're loving. Like we are just made of pure love. Like that sounds probably a bit lunatic, like a bit of lunacy, but I mean, that is the thing that everybody cares the most about is love. Like they're like, it's also the focus of all this mythology that exists out there about how love always wins. You know, the whole thing with Star Wars, like, it is Luke's decision not to kill his father that is the key thing there. Like Vader kills, you know, Vader, like he puts himself at his mercy. He surrenders to him. And that is like a total act of sacrifice. It's the same fucking thing as like what Jesus did, or was like Jesus' story is telling the exact same thing about what love is. He threw himself at the mercy of his father, and it was that act that caused Vader to like realize and kill the Emperor or whatever the fuck he did. I can't remember. But these things are like, you know, this whole thing with me recently, I sacrificed everything for another person. Now, I don't want to get into any of the details of all this family stuff, but I sacrificed everything for a very special person to me. And, you know, and it's as a result of this whole thing, I'm basically a fucking pariah. Like I honestly, like, you know, like if you look at the situation I'm in now, like I got a ton of people who won't talk to me. People on the fucking internet who saw some of the shit that I was posting who think I'm a fucking lunatic. Like, but you know, like as part of this process, like I went down to I've been seen by 2 psychiatrists, given a full clean bill of health since all this this happened. Because it's like, you know, the whole thing about when you're following your heart is, you know, you kind of like start to wake up to this notion that we are all mirrors to one another. Like everything that comes back to us from apparently another person is, you know, it's like the law of return in Christianity, karma and like Eastern in mysticism. But like one of the things Alan Watts, do you know Alan Watts?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Alan Watts was like this like guy who was raised in England for a bit, then he went over to like Japan, like, you know, became like you know, brought all this like Eastern wisdom back, and his stuff is like, listening to him talk, I could listen to that guy forever.
It's like syrup.
Oh yeah, it's so good. But
Yeah.
it's like, he called himself a spiritual entertainer, which I suppose, that's what I'm doing here. But he basically, he talked about how, where was I? What was I talking about before that when I brought up Watts?
You were talking about how you've been made a pariah.
No, yeah,
in
but he basically,
journey.
yeah, karma. He's like, his definition of karma is it is your doing. That's what it, like, because karma just means action, right? And one of the things that all the things that we encounter in our lives, and we deal with, like, these are all things that karma isn't something like some kind of like force that like will bash you over the head for like in some sort of like revenge type of thing. Like, it's not like about vengeance or anything like that.
Yeah.
Everything that we go through is here to help us wake up. But the reality of time and life is that we count it in lifetimes. But this is one of the things that all these like Eastern traditions like say is true, and which I also like, this has been my experience, is that we come back like if the whole world itself is a triumph over, we'll say what the loneliness and boredom of pure oneness, even though it's blissful, even though like the whole of whatever God or love or whatever is pure bliss, in an undifferentiated world. And like, this is kind of like, well, like time is kind of like not, our whole conception of time is human, and like we cannot conceive of what all the like time in this situation. But this is the best I can kind of like do, because these are all things that I've come to learn over my years with doing this work. If we're going to say like, okay, God or whatever is all one, it's all lonely, it's all bored. And Alan Watts talked a bit about this. He said, like, if you were God, and you just basically were able to create whatever world you wanted to create, and then you just like made it so that it was fun after several lifetimes where you'd go into like whatever, and like you just like had these experiences where everything was great all the time. Eventually you would come to a point where you would say you would want to create a button called surprise and hit it. And this is what the whole like the whole idea of like why we don't know who we are. And like, it's like a game of hide and seek. It's like there's people who are playing the hide game and then the found game, which is like, like this is the, if you want to use Christian mythology, it's the leaving the garden, coming back to the garden. If you want to, these whole, like, they're all like words that don't, what, like when people talk about like all these things about religion being about after death or whatever, what the fuck is a ghost going to do with a book? Everything that's in these books is for us now. It's not got nothing to do with like, like some ultimate reality after death. My experience of this whole thing is like, we die and then we come back. I remember when I was in the Iboga like thing, I saw this, like, it was like the world, and there was the light of God, and all these souls were like these little like smiley faces that were ping pong and boop 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 boop. They were all just like woo, and the whole thing is like this carnival of like this thing, like, which sounds, if you look at all the fucking horrors that are going over in places like the Middle East or like in Gaza or like, or in Ukraine, or like, it doesn't matter where you look, you are going to find a shit ton of misery. Yeah. But one of the things that, the truth is like, you cannot have this world of duality without that existing. One of the things Campbell said was like, if someone would remake the world in his or her own image, in a place where there was no pain, no suffering, no brutality, then that person is not fit for enlightenment, or fit for, I don't think he said enlightenment, fit for illumination.
Well said.
Yeah.
I think I'm borrowing this from Jordan Peterson, but he talks a lot about the hero's journey. So we're all given a journey of struggle.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to not be complacent and to pick up the staff and go for it.
Yeah.
Because only through that is when you can find out who you were. And I'm sure I'm bastardizing that.
Yeah, but that's true. I mean, that's what Campbell said in The Hero's Journey at the end of it. He said, like, Like, you go through all these trials and tribulations, and where you go to think that you're going to face this dragon, like, you only have to follow the thread of the hero path. And the hero path has been, like, you have help because all these myths and stories and people around you who are helping you on this path. But, like, you go to face what you think is a dragon, and where you think it's this Leviathan or whatever, you find out it's an angel, or, like, you find out that it's yourself and you're with the whole world. And that is the reality of it. Like, the end of the hero's journey is a realization of the oneness of the world. If you watch Campbell's interview with Bill Moyers from the 80s, and he's basically having this conversation with, with this guy, with Bill Moyers, who's like an interview, like, doing interviews for PBS. And he's like, Moyers is asking him, I can't remember which episode. It's a great series, by the way. Anyone listening, like, if you want any kind of like information about all that, like, I would highly recommend it. But it's called The Power of Myth, and it's like a PBS series from the 80s, right before Campbell died. But it was at one point he was like talking about like the mystery, and then like Campbell, like, it was like, I don't know if Moyers really truly ever got there, but he was like, it's you. It's you. He even wrote a book called, because there's like from the Upanishads, one of the, the Hindu holy texts or whatever. One of them is has the phrase in it, Tat Tvam Asi, which means thou art that. You are it. Every single person is it. And if you still think that you believe in this separation of this like bag of skin and ego as like your true identity, it's just because you're playing the hidden part of the game. Like, at some point, everybody wakes up, but it doesn't necessarily happen each life. Like, souls have like a journey across lifetimes. Like, what is time to an infinite being? Like, what is the time to an eternal being? Like, it doesn't, like, one of the things, Ram Dass?
No.
So Ram Dass, Timothy Leary.
Yeah.
Okay. So Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, which was Ram Dass's original name, used to be at Harvard together. They were both professors. And, the whole thing with like LSD escaping the lab, because I don't know if you know the history of LSD, but basically, it came, like, there was this chemist named Albert Hofmann who, in the late 30s was working on derivatives of 𝐸𝐵𝐺𝐸, which is like one of the chemicals in ergot fungus. And as part of this, it was taking, like, I don't know, organic chemistry. I have a very limited understanding, but basically it was like
I have more of a limited
he's basically chopping off these chemical groups and like putting like different ones on to see if there was anything could be gotten out of it, because they had found a derivative that could be used to like stanch blood flow during delivery. And so anyways, they were trying to find this stuff. And it's called LSD-25 because this was like the 25th attempt that he had made to like find another drug derivative, because this is how they were doing research back then of this, so ergot fungus is like the fungus that grows on rye grains. Like, there was stories of this St. Anthony's fire, which is basically people eating this shit, like, and it was causing like ergotism, which is like people were tripping balls, but they're also dying. Like, there's like a story of like a French village that like, basically a bunch of people like were like raving like in the streets, like,
wow.
Yeah. So anyways, he was testing this stuff on animals originally. In the late 30s, he basically did this work, put it away, like he never got any kind of thing. But then he got this like intuition in 1943 to try synthesizing this chemical again. And so he did. And as part of that, as part of the synthesis, he somehow got it in his system, and he said it was like a pleasant intoxication. And so then he decided, he was like one of these like, back in the day, like these, like how chemists would like discover stuff, and like they would do what's called bioassay, which where they fucking take the drug themselves. Like, forget about like double-blind, placebo-controlled shit. Like, they were like
they were cowboys.
Cowboy chemistry, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, he's like, he knows like the lethal doses for all these poisons, and so he decides, okay, 250 micrograms, which is 0.25 of a milligram, is not going to, based on all the like pharmacology we know, is unlikely to cause any problems for me, or like beyond like maybe feeling sick or whatever. So he's got his lab assistant there as his like trip sitter, and he takes it and he starts tripping. And this was in '43 when gasoline was being rationed, so like there was no car, so this is called bicycle day nowadays because it was like the first LSD trip. He gets on his bike and like goes back to his house, calls his doctor, thinks he's dying. The doctor takes his vitals, he's fine or whatever. And then he wakes up the next day after like seeing all these demons and all this crazy shit all day. He said it was like he was being like he had like seen the world from a new lens and was being reborn. And so Sandoz there, who owned this fucking thing, like he tells some of the other people there, and they try like 100 micrograms or whatever. They take like a regular, like a little less serious dose, because 250 micrograms is like 2.5 times the normal dose with what like right now, right?
He went hard.
He went hard and didn't realize it. And so anyways, he, they were like, what the fuck do we do with this? So they start sending it around to like universities and different places around the world with like psychiatrists and psychologists, because it wasn't illegal then, like it was whatever, just to see like what are the applications for this. And there was some serious work with these with this stuff in those early days, including like here in Canada there was a Humphrey Osmond. So the word psychedelic itself, he played a part in this in the naming of it, because it was originally between Humphrey Osmond and what's his name, the Englishman who wrote The Doors of Perception, and he wrote Brave New World. Jesus.
Oh, Aldous Huxley.
Aldous Huxley. So the two of them came up with it together, but what's his name? Humphrey Osmond out in Saskatchewan at the University of Saskatoon was using it for alcoholism, and basically having a much higher success rate than what they were getting out of, just like the 12 steps or AA. Funny thing about AA, so Bill Wilson, the guy who started AA, in 1930, he basically was an alcoholic, like bad one, and he was withdrawing from alcohol in like 1930, and he started getting delirium tremens, DTs, which is like, my understanding is, when you flood your NMDA receptors for an extended period of time and then withdraw them, it can be life-threatening. It's the same reason that benzodiazepines, which hit the same receptor, can do it. So basically, like, DTs are potentially fatal. It's the pink elephant or whatever, right? Like, so there's hallucinations. And he had like an encounter with God, and then basically created the 12 steps out of this experience when he stopped drinking. But AA started and went on, like, it was 20 years later when he first took LSD, which is like, he was no longer like in charge of it. But he said, like, he wrote this letter. You can find it online, Bill Wilson LSD letter. And he wrote it to the people in charge of the 12 steps, or Alcoholics Anonymous. And basically said that this was a safe way for people to have the similar type of experience that he had when he was nearly dying from DTs. And he suggested that it should be the 13th step.
Interesting. I've never heard that.
Oh yeah, and which is like, Perfect Circle, the Maynard's band or whatever. There's an album, 13th Step, that's about addiction. But that's okay. Yeah, but yeah, no, this was the so Leary and Alpert, Richard Alpert, going back to them, they, like, Leary went to Mexico, tried magic mushrooms, and said that he learned more about psychology in those 5 hours than he had throughout his whole career, learning psychology. And they came back, told people about it, like, they all took these drugs together, they started getting LSD, they started experimenting on, like, students, and eventually they got booted out of Harvard. They were doing all this stuff that was within the confines of the law, but eventually they didn't like what they were doing, and so that was that. And that was like when, in the 60s, it escaped the lab, because there was a good 17 years where LSD was being used, like, more like by psychologists and all that stuff. Cary Grant, like, there's a bunch of fucking articles about Cary Grant and him talking about how it affected his life, and like in a positive manner. But so Richard Alpert, like, they were trying to basically, like, take these drugs and they go up and they go down and they go up and they go down, and like, he was like finding that it wasn't, like they did this experiment where for 14 days, for 4 hours, every 4 hours they were taking LSD to try to stay high. Yeah. And
wow.
so, but he ended up basically like at the end of his rope, he ended up in India. And in India, he like a friend of his like loans him a Land Rover because he's going to Japan. And like he meets this guy, like a young guy from California, because around Richard Alpert, as he was then, was, you know, in his 40s, and this guy was like in his 20s, but his name was Bhagavan Das, which means the servant of the Lord, essentially. And so he went to, you know, he walked with this guy, and the guy kept telling him, just be here now, just be here now, you're worried about all this shit. And then eventually he said, like, you need to meet my guru. And, you know, Ram Dass was not, you know, or Richard Alpert, he was not like totally bought into all this stuff. He still thought it was a bunch of crap or whatever. But the night before he meets him, he goes out to the lake. He just goes out to this lake, and he's there's thinking about his mother, who he hadn't thought about in years, or like in a long time. And he knew that she was dying of, she was dying of spleen cancer. And so he spent an extended period of time thinking about her. And then he goes to, like, the next day they go to this thing, and like Ram Dass talks about how, like, or Richard Alpert as he was then, talks about how he thought it was all like, you know, all these people like touching this guy's feet. It was this guy like in a blanket, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐫𝐢𝐻, and like it was all a bunch of, you know, basically it was this charlatan that was putting these people on or whatever. And eventually they like make some weight, and eventually they go to this thing, they get up to him, and he says to Ram Dass, or like says to 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐫𝐫, or no, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐫𝐫 says to him through a Hindi interpreter, because there's like a person there who's like interpreting all the, like, you know, doing the translation or whatever, and like basically asks him, I was like, you got any gifts for me? You gonna give me that Land Rover or something like that, you know, like all this stuff. And then he was like,
real shyster stuff.
Yeah, and he was just like he was pushing him, and it's like, and he was like, this fucking guy, like this guy knew it. I knew this was a crock of shit. And then he started saying to him, what were you thinking about where were you last night? Were you at the lake? What were you thinking about? Were you thinking about your mother? And what's wrong with her? Does she got something wrong? Is she sick? And then he says, spleen, is it spleen? Like the word spleen in English, like after all this stuff in like perfect English, apparently. And Ram Dass's mind just started going like, what the fuck? Like it's like CIA, like what the, like, you know, how can he fucking like do, like, anyways, and his fucking mind breaks. And then he spends a day just crying. And then he spends all this time working with, you know, this guru, and like basically, you know, gives him the name Ram Dass, Rama being one of the avatars of one of the gods. There's three gods. There's the creator, preserver, and destroyer. I can't remember. I think it was Vishnu, the preserver. Anyways, but an avatar of God. But it's like basically Ram Dass, servant of Ram, which is the same in the story of the Ramayana, which forms one of the Hindu holy texts. It's about Rama and his consort Sita, and like their life together. But anyways, Hanuman is like this monkey god who serves Rama perfectly, and so this is like the whole idea. But anyways, that's all just like this mythology that it's like talking about what the event, like the spiritual process is. I mean, if I had to like really describe it, at any given point, we have like, you know, this is something that doesn't really occur in my head anymore, but at any point, like we have a million different thoughts. You know, there's one saying this, one saying that, one saying this, one saying that, one saying this, one saying that, all these fears and anxieties about the past and the future. And, you know, the point, like the whole process of waking up to ourselves is like finding what our heart sounds like. I remember when I discovered this, which is it was in a ceremony in Peru in September 2015. It was like I started having these thoughts, and that were accompanied by goosebumps, and it was like I was being like shown that these were the thoughts, so that like the, you know, the sensation of awe or whatever, these are the thoughts that I should follow to the letter. And, you know, I went through this process of coming home and basically doing like I couldn't rationalize it. It was like I was ended up at fucking Shoppers buying like some fucking like argan oil for my hair, like, you know, like it was, and like my entire look changed. And if you like, you know, like there was no manipulation of reality on my part. I was just following this thing that was like a purely irrational, like think about love. If you really think about love, it's a completely irrational force. Like you go and meet somebody and eventually end up in a relationship with them. And like you got to say, like you say to yourself, like, what, like, because people on paper who are a perfect match, not a fucking like that, like there's no spark. Or like people who are a terrible match, there's fucking all these things that happen. Like, you know what, like it's a force of nature that is completely uncontrollable. And if we are all love, which we are, then what we are is completely wild. It's completely up to its own fucking thing. And that was like the process for me, for spirituality, like what it is like you get in tune with that thing. Like you are like, you're basically riding the edge of a knife all the time. But that's what it seems like, you know, like, and this is part of the hero's journey, you know, like the road of trials and all this stuff, like it, like they talks about being on this like knife's edge where it seems like, you know, if you make one decision one way or the another the wrong way, like you could fucking, you know, fall off into the abyss. But you just got to keep following that all the way through. Which, you know, like from an internal experience perspective, because nobody knows what other people are thinking in terms of like, you know, I can't tell what you're thinking right now, you know, like I can't do that. But you know, the you know, this world of mythology and of like these things that like kind of like push us in like these directions, like when you follow it, like, you know, it opens things up to be very fucking weird, you know, like fucking Hunter S. Thompson said, never got weird enough for me, right? Like, and that was a guy who was fucking following his own thing, like to the letter.
Yeah.
You know, he was doing his thing like to the letter. And when people do their own thing to the letter, like it appears weird. It appears fucking like whatever. Like, you know, the last time I was in Peru though, I got this very fucking clear message that weird is good. It's good because it means that you're not letting the confines of the way you think the world should be fuck with the way it is. Because that's what it is, right? Like the conception of what the world should be is the biggest fucking thing in the spokes of anybody trying to wake up to their own selves. Like I swear like a sailor. I talk like David Holloway sometimes. I like to get on with David Holloway, and it freaked so many fucking people out when I just started doing this. Now, they didn't know that I'd been practicing voice acting for years, trying to get him for me books. But eventually it just clicked, just the same way as when my daughter was born. I had this crazy spiritual awakening, and then suddenly I was able to write my first book. And I just do it by sitting down there and just letting it flow out. There's no thought to anything I do now. And that, what I mean by thought is like when you think that you have a choice. It's what Jiddu Krishnamurti called. He was like a sage from like the early 1900s. But he talked about this idea of choiceless awareness. It's when you no longer look at the world as like there's like multiple thoughts that you can follow. It's just basically you're totally in tune with it, and then you're just going with it. And like, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I don't give a shit about what happened yesterday. It's like being like right here in the moment at every given time, which was the name of Ram Dass's first book. Because 𝐿 Baba, at the end of his like little like time in India, he came back to the US, and he started like basically like giving talks and like, you know, sharing all this stuff, because that's the end of the hero's journey. After there's somebody ends up in the realm of the gods or whatever, there's the return of the boon to the community. And this was something Alan Watts talked about. They talked about like this idea of like, you know, that's held with contempt in like Buddhist ideology of the Pratyeka Buddha, which is the selfish Buddha that doesn't share any of what they have learned with the community. And that's what he's doing. I mean, this is me doing it now. Like, it just fucking happened. Like, I don't know.
So when did this shift happen in your thinking?
Well, I had, because it's not just one hero's journey. Like Campbell talks about like having this like multiple thing. But I remember it was on October the 3rd, and I decided after witnessing something with people close to me that I'm not going to fucking put up with this shit any longer. And, I remember, because one of the things part of this whole process was basically putting other people in front of you. Like getting out of your own way. Stop giving a shit about yourself and just think about what's best for other people, which is all I've been doing. And I remember there was this fella, because I basically, like, as part of this, right before I had my first awakening, I remember like giving a pair of socks to this guy on the street, asking him his name, like asking his story, and then I went to like volunteer at a soup kitchen. Those were the things that kicked this whole thing off. And that was like right after my daughter was born. I was on paternity leave in 2017, and we'll say like this total explosion moment came. I remember I was like passing this guy, and his name was Matthew Doyle. He was in the street there, and he basically was looking for money. I had no cash, so I was like, "I'll go get you something." So I walked away from him. I came back. I was like, "I don't know what you want." And he's like, "Smokes and a Pepsi." Now we were on Water Street, quite a ways away from Marie's, which was the only place that was close by where I could get him smokes and Pepsi. So I made this like 20-minute trek, got him the smokes and the Pepsi. And he said to me, "You are going to heaven." He said, "This is exactly what Jesus did, blah, 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 all this stuff," right? Like, and I was just like, dude, man, I just like, you're there. Like, I had other stuff to do. But the way I've been looking at life is like anybody who's put in front of me is there for a reason. And, he was looking for help. I had the fucking means to help him. So Jesus did what he asked. And anyways, I remember like, I had to get ready for this party I had people coming over for work. And I get in the car, and it's almost like I have this like I can't. It was like a moment of transformation, like death and rebirth, whatever the fuck you want to think. But as a result of that, suddenly I was able to talk like Captain David Holloway. And when I went back to the house, I was talking with all these people, making them roar with laughter because I was making all these jokes about the whole thing. But then this other stuff started to unfold, just like as a part of it, and this was kind of like the thing. And now, like, I could be out on the street and the fucking, like, when this money from work runs out, like, I have no fucking idea how this is all going to work out. But one of the things that Campbell said, which is the truth, because this has happened in various different ways in a much less public manner before this. He says, "I don't need faith. I have experience," which might sound like overconfidence or the height of whatever, but like a height of foolhardiness. But it's like this is, the way it works is that you're given all these tests along this journey so that when it comes time for you to put all your chips on the right bet, which is love, then you're ready for it. It just happens naturally. Krishna Das, who is one of Ram Dass's contemporaries, another guy who went out there to India with him, who sings kirtan, which is like devotional yoga. It's basically singing the names of God. It's like a chant, whatever. Great fellow. Anyways, he talked about how the awakening process isn't about, you can't force it. It's like fruit ripening on a tree. It just happens in its own time, which is the way reality works. Which is like, people talk about God's plan or whatever. God being the thing that you cannot fucking talk about. You literally cannot talk about. But that whole idea is like a total, like, it's like, again, you're putting some other separate thing, like nature itself. This is something William Blake said when in one of his poems in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Basically, nature, like man and nature were, one at some point, and that like all these things were whatever, and then the priests started coming in and started putting names on different things. And that is when this breakdown or the division of, ourselves from nature, when we started getting all these anxieties and worries and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I look at the advent of agriculture, which is like what we needed in order to, to survive. It's like it allowed us to basically store and hoard wealth. There's so many people who are suffering because they're hoarding wealth. Like it's just like it's they were suffering, the world is suffering, all this shit, like I'm not like my, but there's been so many lessons over the years about giving up my attachment to money and like worrying about what's going to come the following, because like I got no savings, I got debt, I got whatever, and here I am, like, just basically going with the flow of whatever's going to happen and just saying yes to it. That was one of the last things I got out of this. Just say yes to life. Just say yes to it. Anything that seems like a problem to you, just say yes. I'm glad this is here and this is something I got to deal with. It'll make you happier, I promise.
So have you found, and it sounds like you have you found the healing you were looking for through psychedelics?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of like, it was not just ayahuasca. It was like everything under the sun, like mescaline, like fucking LSD, like, like all these things. The thing about what happened in Peru is that I learned how to use psychedelics in a sacred way. I mean, these are sacred medicines. And the way that they use them in Peru, like they don't fucking take it, like I fucking was banging cocaine and got loaded the night of my call to the bar, which was 2 days before I fucking went to, before I took `iboga. And, like that was one of the first things this fucking disembodied head of Stephen the House, fucking `iboga man, said to me. He's like, you're not a like hardcore drug addict. You're not like, you've approached this with total disrespect and you're going to kick your fucking ass for it. And that was what happened. Like it was a fucking brutalizing time. But, this is like the thing about the problem that exists with this stuff and the way it's regulated and all this kind of stuff. Like right now it's like, considered to have no medical value, which is a crock of shit, right? Like it's like microbiologists discovering the microscope and then throwing the fucking thing in the trash because somebody's fucking afraid of it. I mean, the reason that psychedelics are illegal, Nixon was on fucking tape, you can fucking look it up, saying that he was using these laws, these drug laws, against the hippies because of all the anti-war sentiment. Yeah. Like it was like there's like it's there, and yet people will like cling to this notion that the reason that they're illegal is because they fucking like gets caught in your fucking spine or something. They like have these flashbacks or whatever. There
was an interesting link between the Manson murders and the CIA too, so I'm sure that was leverage to push forth.
Oh yeah, I mean,
making it all legal.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like this all, when it was being used in like these research settings and all this kind of stuff, like there's all kinds of like positive like data from those days, and like people talk about how it didn't like it wasn't like stringently according to like placebo controlled, double blind, whatever. But the reality is like these things cannot be like really studied in that manner, because the moment that somebody starts tripping, you are going to fucking know it, as opposed to the person who got like the sugar pill or whatever. They tried to do it with niacin, I think was one of the early ones. Like they would give people mushrooms or psilocybin and then give them niacin, because the niacin caused a flush or like a reaction. But it's like, but still like there's no like placebo control in it. Like the only way you can do it, I suppose, is like if you're looking at it from the context of like psychedelic therapy, which is like how MDMA with MAPS was trying to be legalized, which is another fucking crazy story. Like MDMA was like, so the way that MDMA was discovered is kind of similar to the way that LSD was discovered. The 𝐶𝐲 was like a chemistry student in the 70s, or who basically worked for the DEA in order to like test drugs from people who were like caught or whatever. But he was given a license to basically do whatever he wanted. And that included his first experience with psychedelics with mescaline, which is from peyote, San Pedro, Huachuma, whatever, the cacti. And he, basically did with mescaline what Albert Hofmann was doing with ergotamine. And he was taking off all these chains. And like MDMA was originally synthesized in the 20s, wasn't viewed as something to be used for humans at all or whatever. But 𝐶𝐲 did it, which is like it's chemically related to mescaline or structurally related to mescaline. It's a phenethylamine. And he, tried it and like had like this great experience with it, and then like contacted his buddy Leo Zeff, who was like a psychologist who had gone out of practice. And they started using it for couples therapy. And, you know, he came out of retirement in order to use it. Like, there's like all these like people who were using all this stuff. And then, but it did the same thing with as LSD. It escaped the lab. Some guy in like in Texas was Houston or something. Anyways, he was basically put the name ecstasy on it. You know, that was called Adam by these people who were using it originally, which is like got to do with like the biblical mythology of Adam, like the first man or whatever. But the you know, they when it was decided that the DEA were going to make it illegal, there was like a month period based on the law that somebody could file an appeal, and so they did. And they filed it with the DEA's own like court system, and you know, they went there, like the people who were doing it, which included the MAPS founder Rick Doblin, who basically was like from this point, like when it was made illegal, like he fought to like get it like legalized for like, you know, they failed last year, but anyways, in any event, they put all this data in front of this DEA judge of like psychologists, psychiatrists, patients, couples, people who had like found like that it was super healing. And then the DEA's judge said to the DEA's lawyer, "You cannot say that this is Schedule 1 has no medical value." And then like a couple weeks later, they found some loophole to make it illegal. But I mean, this is like, everyone's so fucking ignorant of what this stuff is. Like, you know, they talk about this stuff as like a club drug or whatever. But, you know, like it's another one that I did, like in the very, like, you know, following the same sort of like put the headphones on, eye mask on, all that kind of stuff. And I want to say that I'm not encouraging anyone to do what I did. You know, I've got no need for drugs at all anymore. Like all that, the process is done. There is an end to the healing process. This idea that it's got to be something that goes on for the rest of your life, that there's no end to it, I think is part of like this, like why do we say that about mental health? Like, you know, we say that like you break your leg, eventually it'll heal, right? You know, you know, sure there are chronic health conditions that do need to be treated for life, but I don't think that mental health needs to be looked at that way. At least my experience of it hasn't been that way, because eventually, by doing the work, by not shying away from it, just following my heart all the way through, which is the funny thing about all this is like when I basically got locked into following my heart, which happened in September of 2015, I have been doing that all the way through for the last 10 years. So if anyone thinks I'm fucking nuts, I'm just as nuts now as I was a month ago, because I'm doing the exact same thing from a psychological perspective in terms of following that thing into the fucking wild blue yonder, which is what the whole, you know, the whole thing is about. Like, if you read The Hero with 1,000 Faces, it's talked about, like, it was so opaque to me when I fucking first read it, but it is, all this shit that I'm talking about is in there. It's just got to be something you got to have your eyes open for.
That brings me to the final question.
Yeah.
If you could offer some advice to anyone going through a rough time, what would it be?
It's the same thing that I taught my daughter a little while back, or like we discussed it anyways, but it is the golden rule. It is treat everyone the way you would want to be treated yourself. And, you know, this is like, you can modulate this by like looking at something Ram Dass said, which was treat everyone you meet like God in drag. Because the reality is like, if we are all extensions of the one, if we are all the one looking at itself, the universe experiencing itself, we're all God in our own way. Now, you can say we're all, if that one, like, oh, God, he's talking about God, he's fucking nuts. You can say nature. You can put on like any kind of like clothes that you want to say, because unless you've had the experience, like, well, you don't know fucking idea what I'm talking about when I say God. But if you treat other people like gods, as in you fucking serve them to the extreme, like put yourself down for them, which is exactly what fucking Jesus was talking about, like dying for our sins. He fucking gave up his life for other people. And like, do not look at the world in terms of fucking like any kind of like ideas of separation. Your family is every single person that you meet. Your family is not just your kid. Your family is not just your sister. Your family is not just your parents. Your family is the world itself. And if you act in that manner, you will become happier. You just have to fucking have the courage to, whenever somebody says that they need something from you, like be like, okay, hey, like maybe I can help you here, or like I'd like to help you, or maybe start thinking about other people before you start acting. You know, there's like, I'm sure that there's a lot of people who have interpreted some of what I've done over the past couple of weeks, which I don't want to get into, as being selfish. But every single thing, every part of this whole thing has been a selfless act. I remember, you know, because as part of my like leaving process, I started talking to my boss, and like, because I was trying to make the point that appearances are not what fucking matters. It's this obsession with appearances that is making everyone fucking unhappy. And so I started talking with everybody in this fucking like this pirate accent, but everything I was saying was completely fucking like ordered and like rational. I was just talking, like, it was just acting. But it was like everyone just like focused on that as like being some sort of me having a screw loose or whatever. But I remember, you know, because I was basically said, oh, you can take some time off work or whatever to deal with all this stuff. And then I remember just saying, like, look, I'm here. If you need any help with anything, like, you know, I'm here to help. And a colleague of mine said, look at you, they're putting everybody else first again. You know, like, this is sacrifice of everything for love is what all this is. And do I seem worried to you?
No, definitely not.
And the question is that insanity, or is it because I've stumbled on something that maybe you haven't stumbled on yet? Because it's everybody's birthright to arrive here. But it just takes work. You just got to fucking work on it.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks, Jordan. I appreciate it.